Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we are pulling back the curtain on a week that should alarm every citizen paying attention to the machinery of war, the erosion of accountability, and the global realignment of power happening right before our eyes.
I'm Maya Clarity, and we have a packed show tonight. We're going to take you from the halls of the Pentagon, where a familiar drumbeat toward a new Middle Eastern war is growing louder, to the streets of Britain, where a grassroots political rebellion is gaining serious momentum. We'll look at a devastating forensic report on violence against aid workers in Gaza, a political purge inside China's military, and the return of one of the most polarizing figures in British politics.
But here's the thread that ties all of this together, and I want you to hold on to it as we go through each story tonight. The thread is accountability, or rather the total absence of it. Governments making life and death decisions based on manipulated intelligence. Military forces killing aid workers with impunity. Political establishments purging dissent from within. And citizens, ordinary people, trying to claw back some measure of power through the only tools they have left.
So let's get into it. And we're starting with the biggest story of the week, one that could define the next decade of American foreign policy and cost thousands of lives if it goes the direction many analysts fear it's heading.
That's right. We're talking about Iran. And if what's happening right now feels familiar, that's because you've seen this movie before. Let's go back to 2003.
Our first story tonight comes from detailed reporting by Al Jazeera, and the headline alone should send a chill down the spine of anyone who remembers the lead-up to the Iraq War. The piece is titled How Trump's 2026 Iran War Script Echoes and Twists the 2003 Iraq Playbook. And Alex, the parallels are not subtle.
They are not. Let's walk through this carefully, because the details matter. In 2003, the Bush administration built a case for invading Iraq on the claim that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. That intelligence was cherry-picked, exaggerated, and in some cases fabricated. We know this now. It's historical fact. The CIA's own post-war assessments confirmed it. And yet that manufactured case led to a war that killed hundreds of thousands of people, destabilized an entire region, and whose consequences we are still living with today.
And now, according to the Al Jazeera reporting, we are seeing a strikingly similar pattern emerge with Iran. The Trump administration is using conflicting intelligence assessments, selectively amplifying the most alarming interpretations while sidelining dissenting voices within the intelligence community, to build a public case that Iran poses an imminent threat to the American homeland. That phrase, imminent threat, is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, just as it did in 2003.
What's particularly dangerous this time, and the Al Jazeera piece lays this out clearly, is how the administration is twisting the playbook. In 2003, the primary justification was weapons of mass destruction abroad. This time, the framing is shifting toward homeland threats, the idea that Iran or its proxies could strike American soil. That's a much more emotionally potent argument. It bypasses the war weariness that Americans feel after 2 decades of Middle Eastern conflicts by making it personal, making it about your neighborhood, your city.
And the intelligence picture, according to multiple analysts cited in the reporting, is genuinely conflicting. There are assessments that point in different directions. That's normal in intelligence work. But what's not normal, what's dangerous, is when an administration selects only the assessments that support a predetermined policy conclusion and presents them to the public as settled fact. That is exactly what happened with Iraq, and multiple sources are now warning that it is happening again.
Let's talk about who benefits from this escalation, because it's never just about national security. Defense contractors saw their stock prices surge after the Iraq War began. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, these companies made billions. The same defense industry has been lobbying aggressively for a harder line on Iran. Campaign contributions from defense sector PACs to hawkish members of Congress have increased substantially in recent cycles. This is not conspiracy theory. This is public financial disclosure data.
And who loses? The same people who always lose. American service members, many of them from working-class communities, who will be asked to fight and die. Iranian civilians who have nothing to do with their government's nuclear program. And the broader cause of diplomacy and international law, which takes another devastating blow every time a major power launches a war based on manipulated intelligence.
There's another dimension here that the Al Jazeera piece highlights, which is the role of media complicity. In 2003, major American outlets, including the New York Times, amplified the administration's WMD claims without sufficient scrutiny. Many of those outlets later issued corrections or apologies. The question now is whether the press has learned that lesson or whether the same cycle of uncritical amplification is beginning again.
And that's why reporting like this matters. When journalists actually compare the current rhetoric to the historical record, when they name the pattern, that's a form of accountability. It's not enough on its own, but it's essential. Because the American public deserves to know that they are being led down a path they've walked before, and that the last time, the destination was catastrophe.
Now let's cross the Atlantic, because what's happening in the United Kingdom right now represents one of the most significant grassroots political movements we've seen in years, and it is directly connected to the broader questions of war, accountability, and complicity that we've been discussing.
This story comes from Al Jazeera's reporting on a campaign that has now seen more than 1,000 UK local councillors sign a Palestine pledge ahead of upcoming local elections. 1,000 elected officials at the local level. Let that number sink in, because it represents something remarkable about the state of British politics right now.
The pledge itself is focused on a specific, concrete demand, pressuring local authorities to divest from companies that manufacture weapons used by the Israeli military. This isn't abstract solidarity. This is about municipal pension funds, council procurement contracts, and local government investment portfolios. It's about following the money and cutting it off at the local level when the national government refuses to act.
And the timing is critical. With local elections approaching across England, these councillors are making a calculated political statement. They're saying to their constituents, particularly in areas with significant Muslim and progressive communities, that they hear the demand for action on Palestine and they are willing to put their political careers behind it. This is grassroots democracy functioning as a pressure mechanism on a national government that has been largely unresponsive to public sentiment on this issue.
What makes this particularly significant is the scale. Individual councillors taking positions on foreign policy is not new. But a coordinated campaign involving over 1,000 of them, with a specific policy demand around divestment, that represents an organized political force. And it's happening across party lines. These aren't all councillors from one party. This is cutting across the traditional Labour-Conservative divide.
The divestment angle is especially important because it has historical precedent. The anti-apartheid movement in the 1980s used exactly this strategy, pressuring local governments, universities, and pension funds to divest from companies doing business with South Africa. That campaign was dismissed as naive and ineffective by establishment voices at the time. History proved them wrong. Divestment became one of the most powerful tools in the international campaign against apartheid.
And the arms manufacturers in question are not small players. We're talking about companies like BAE Systems, Elbit Systems, and others that have documented contracts supplying military equipment used in operations that international human rights organizations have characterized as potential violations of international humanitarian law. When a local council's pension fund holds shares in these companies, local taxpayers are effectively, if indirectly, invested in those operations.
The pushback, predictably, has come from those who argue that local government has no business involving itself in foreign policy. But the councillors behind this campaign would argue that it isn't foreign policy at all. It's fiscal responsibility. It's about where public money is invested and whether those investments align with the values and wishes of the communities those councillors represent. That's about as local as governance gets.
Now, this UK political story connects directly to our next headline, because the man who has arguably done more than any other mainstream British politician to put Palestine at the centre of political discourse has just won a significant leadership contest.
Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of the Labour Party, has been elected as the leader of your party, a new political formation, after defeating Zarah Sultana in a leadership vote. This is reported by Middle East Eye, and it represents a significant new chapter in one of the most dramatic political stories in modern British history.
Let's put this in context for our viewers who may not follow British politics closely. Jeremy Corbyn led the Labour Party from 2015 to 2020. Under his leadership, Labour saw its membership surge to over 500,000 people, making it the largest political party in Europe. He ran on a platform of anti-austerity, public ownership of utilities, and crucially, a much more sympathetic stance toward Palestinian rights than any previous major party leader.
He was also subjected to what many of his supporters describe as an unprecedented campaign of political and media hostility. He was expelled from the Labour Party by his successor, Keir Starmer, ostensibly over his response to an internal report on anti-Semitism, though his allies have consistently argued that the real motivation was ideological, a determination by the Labour establishment to purge the left-wing movement Corbyn represented.
And now he's back, not within Labour, but at the head of a new party that appears to be positioning itself as an alternative for voters who feel abandoned by Labour's rightward shift under Starmer. The fact that he defeated Zarah Sultana, a younger, dynamic left-wing politician who was herself expelled from Labour, suggests that the membership of this new party wanted the most recognizable, battle-tested figure available to lead them into what will be a challenging electoral landscape.
The significance for our coverage tonight is that Corbyn's new party is almost certainly going to make Palestine and foreign policy a central part of its platform. Combined with the councillors' pledge we just discussed, you're seeing the emergence of a genuine political movement in the UK that is organizing around opposition to Western complicity in Middle Eastern conflicts. Whether you agree with their positions or not, the political energy here is real and it is growing.
And it connects to the divestment campaign because Corbyn has historically been one of the most vocal advocates for exactly that kind of economic pressure. With a party apparatus behind him now, even a small one, he has a platform to amplify those demands in a way that individual councillors acting alone cannot.
The broader question is whether your party can actually win seats or whether it will simply split the progressive vote and inadvertently help the Conservatives. That's the perennial challenge for new left-wing parties in Britain's first-past-the-post electoral system. But even if they don't win many seats, their presence in the political landscape forces Labour to respond. And that pressure, that dynamic, is itself a form of political power.
Now let's turn to a story that strips away all the political abstractions and confronts us with the raw, documented reality of what is happening on the ground in Gaza. And I want to warn our viewers, the details of this report are deeply disturbing.
Al Jazeera is reporting on a new forensic investigation that has found Israeli forces fired more than 900 bullets at a Palestinian medical convoy in March of 2025, killing 15 aid workers. 900 bullets. At a medical convoy. Let those numbers exist together in your mind for a moment.
This is not an allegation from one side of the conflict. This is a documented forensic finding based on physical evidence, ballistic analysis, and witness testimony compiled into a formal report. 900 rounds fired at vehicles that were clearly marked as medical, carrying aid workers who were engaged in humanitarian operations. 15 people killed. 15 aid workers whose job was to save lives.
The forensic detail here is important because it speaks to intent. 900 bullets is not a stray round. It is not a tragic case of mistaken identity resolved in seconds. 900 bullets represents sustained, deliberate fire directed at identified targets over an extended period. It suggests a decision to engage and continue engaging even as the nature of the target should have been unmistakable.
And this is part of a documented pattern. International organizations, including the United Nations and Doctors Without Borders, have repeatedly reported attacks on medical personnel and infrastructure in Gaza. The World Health Organization has catalogued hundreds of attacks on healthcare facilities and workers since the current conflict escalated. Each one is investigated. Each one is documented. And yet the attacks continue.
The question of accountability here is stark and unavoidable. Under international humanitarian law, specifically the Geneva Conventions, medical personnel and medical transports are explicitly protected. Attacking them is not a gray area. It is a war crime. When forensic evidence documents 900 rounds fired at a medical convoy, the legal framework is clear. The question is whether any institution with the power to enforce that framework has the political will to do so.
And so far, the answer has been no. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israeli officials, but enforcement depends on member states. The United Nations has passed resolutions, but Security Council action is blocked by American vetoes. The mechanisms of international accountability exist on paper, but in practice they are paralyzed by geopolitical power dynamics. And every day that this impunity continues, the message it sends to every military force in the world is devastating: you can target aid workers, and nothing will happen.
This connects directly to the earlier stories we covered. The councillors signing the Palestine Pledge in the UK are responding to exactly this reality. They're saying, if national governments and international institutions won't hold anyone accountable, then we will use whatever levers we have at the local level. The divestment demand isn't abstract idealism. It's a response to documented atrocities like the one we're discussing right now.
And it connects to the Iran story too, because the erosion of accountability in one conflict emboldens escalation in others. When a government sees that attacking medical convoys produces no consequences, when an administration sees that manufacturing intelligence for war produces no accountability, the incentive structure for restraint collapses. These stories are not isolated. They are symptoms of a single crisis in the international order.
Let's turn now to our final story tonight, which takes us to Beijing and into the opaque but fascinating world of Chinese military politics. China's top legislature, the National People's Congress, has removed 9 military officials from its list of deputies ahead of the annual 2 sessions political meetings.
This comes from reporting by the South China Morning Post, and the details are striking. Among the 9 officials removed were 5 full generals, 1 lieutenant general, and 3 major generals. The removal reduces the total number of PLA and People's Armed Police deputies to 243. Now, in any other political system, the removal of 5 4-star generals from a legislative body days before a major political meeting would be front-page news around the world. In China's system, it's reported almost matter-of-factly by state media through Xinhua.
And that's precisely what makes it so significant. China's political system operates through signals rather than spectacles. When the NPC quietly removes 9 military officials, including 5 of its most senior generals, that's not routine administrative housekeeping. That's a message. And the message is directed both inward, toward the military establishment, and outward, toward anyone watching Chinese politics carefully.
This fits into a pattern that has been ongoing under Xi Jinping's leadership, a systematic consolidation of control over the People's Liberation Army. Xi has overseen the most extensive military purge in China since the Mao era. Dozens of senior officers have been removed, investigated, or disappeared from public life over the past several years, often on corruption charges. The anti-corruption campaign is real, there is genuine corruption in the PLA, but it also serves as a mechanism for ensuring personal loyalty at the highest levels of military command.
The timing ahead of the 2 sessions is particularly deliberate. These annual meetings are when China's political leadership sets the agenda for the year, announces economic targets, and signals policy priorities. By cleaning house in the military delegation beforehand, the leadership is ensuring that the PLA representatives who will be present are aligned with the current political direction. There will be no dissenting voices, no awkward questions, no surprises.
What's important for an international audience to understand is what this tells us about the state of civil-military relations in China. A military that is being purged this aggressively is a military that the political leadership does not fully trust. That has implications for everything from China's posture in the Taiwan Strait to its military modernization program to its relationships with other major powers. A political leader who feels the need to constantly purge his generals is not a leader who feels secure in his control, regardless of what the official narrative says.
And there's a connection here to the broader theme of our show tonight. In every story we've covered, we see institutions of power operating without transparency and without external accountability. The Trump administration selectively using intelligence to justify potential military action. Israeli forces attacking medical convoys with documented impunity. And now, China's political leadership quietly removing senior military figures with no public explanation, no due process, and no independent oversight.
The mechanisms differ. The political systems differ. But the underlying dynamic is the same. Power, unchecked, behaves in predictable ways. It consolidates. It eliminates dissent. It manufactures justifications. It targets the vulnerable. And it resists accountability at every turn.
So let's pull all of this together, because tonight's stories, taken individually, are important. But taken together, they reveal something larger about the world we're living in right now.
We started with the United States potentially manufacturing a case for war with Iran, using the same playbook that led to catastrophe in Iraq. That's a story about the most powerful military on earth being pointed at a new target based on manipulated intelligence. If this escalation proceeds, it won't be the decision-makers who pay the price. It will be service members, civilians, and the stability of an entire region.
We then cross to the United Kingdom, where over 1,000 local councillors are trying to use the tools of municipal government to push back against complicity in conflict. Where a veteran political leader is building a new party explicitly around the demand for a different foreign policy. These are stories about citizens and politicians trying to reassert democratic control over decisions of war and peace, using whatever imperfect tools they have.
We confronted the forensic reality of what unchecked military power looks like on the ground in Gaza, 900 bullets fired at a medical convoy, 15 aid workers killed, and a pattern of impunity that continues because the international mechanisms designed to prevent exactly this have been systematically neutralized by geopolitical interests.
And we looked at China, where a political leadership is purging its own military command structure in ways that tell us as much about insecurity at the top as they do about corruption in the ranks.
The pattern across all of these stories is the gap between the rules that are supposed to govern the use of power and the reality of how power actually operates. International humanitarian law says you don't shoot at medical convoys. Intelligence standards say you don't cherry-pick assessments to justify predetermined conclusions. Democratic norms say military leadership changes happen through transparent, institutional processes. And yet, in every case tonight, we see those rules being broken, bent, or ignored by those with the power to do so.
And that gap, that space between what the rules say and what actually happens, that's where journalism lives. That's where accountability has to come from when institutions fail. It comes from documentation, from forensic evidence, from reporters on the ground, from analysts willing to name the pattern, and from citizens willing to act on the information they receive.
Which brings us to you. Every story we cover tonight, every one of them, exists on a spectrum between two possible futures. One where accountability is restored, where intelligence is scrutinized, where aid workers are protected, where military power is checked by civilian oversight, and where citizens have genuine influence over the decisions made in their name. And another where the gap keeps widening, where impunity becomes the norm, and where the rules-based order that was built after the catastrophes of the 20th century continues its slow collapse.
The councillors signing that pledge in the UK have made their choice. The journalists compiling forensic evidence in Gaza have made their choice. The analysts calling out the echoes of 2003 in today's Iran rhetoric have made their choice. The question, as always, is what the rest of us will do with the information they're providing.
That's the work of Truth Report. We don't tell you what to think. We show you what's happening, we name the patterns, we follow the money and the power, and we trust you to draw the conclusions that the evidence demands.
If tonight's reporting matters to you, share it. Talk about it. Write to your representatives. Support the journalists doing this work on the ground in the most dangerous places in the world. Accountability doesn't happen by itself. It happens because people demand it and refuse to stop demanding it.
For Truth Report, I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity.
Stay informed. Stay critical. And never stop asking who benefits.
Good night.